What if I told you that giving away free food to a hungry child could make you a millionaire? Keisha Williams had $18 to her name. Her daughter needed new shoes. The rent was due in 3 days. But when she saw 12-year-old Thomas shivering outside Rosa's diner, she didn't think twice. She opened that door and fed him anyway. Every single morning for 3 months, using her own tip money, never asking for anything back. She had no idea this boy's father had been watching her, every day, from those black cars parked across the street. She had no idea Thomas wasn't just any ordinary kid. And she definitely had no idea that when those SUVs pulled up that Friday morning, everything would change forever. Because sometimes, when you give everything you have to someone who needs it, the universe gives you back something incredible. This is that story. But let's go back to the beginning, when Keisha thought her biggest worry was just making rent. 5:30 a.m. The alarm screamed in Keisha's cramped one-bedroom apartment above the laundromat. Maya, her 8-year-old daughter, was still curled up on the pull-out couch they called her bed. Keisha padded to the kitchen 3 steps from anywhere to anywhere else and opened the fridge. Half a loaf of bread, generic peanut butter running low, a carton of milk that would last maybe 2 more days. She counted the coins in the mason jar on the counter. $18.37 until Friday. Maya's school shoes had holes so big you could see her socks, but rent was due in 3 days. $18, she whispered to herself. Just make it to Friday. The math was always the same, always brutal. Rosa's diner sat on the edge of downtown like a stubborn old dog that refused to move. Yellow booths with duct tape holding the cracks together, coffee that had been brewing since the Clinton administration. But it was work, and work meant survival. "Morning, Mr. Rosa," Keisha called out, tying her apron as she walked through the back door. "You're 5 minutes late, mija," Rosa grumbled, but his eyes were kind. At 68, he'd hired Keisha 6 months ago when no one else would. Single mother, no restaurant experience, desperate. He'd seen it all before. The morning rush was the same every day. Construction workers grabbing coffee and donuts. Night shift nurses stopping by before heading home. People who tipped in quarters and knew exactly how much those quarters meant. Keisha remembered every order. Jerry, the electrician, liked his eggs over easy with extra toast. Mrs. Patterson, the postal worker, needed her coffee black with 2 sugars, no conversation before 7 a.m. The homeless woman who came in twice a week got a full meal that Keisha paid for with her own tips. "You can't keep doing that," Rosa warned after the woman left. "We're not a charity." But Keisha couldn't help herself. She'd been that hungry once. She remembered being 12 years old, standing outside restaurants, too proud to ask but too hungry to leave. During her break, she pulled out the community college brochures she kept hidden under the register. Nursing program. 2 years. Evening classes. The application fee alone was $60 more than she had left this week. Maya deserved better than this. They both did. But every time Keisha started to fill out the application, something else came up. Maya's school supplies, a medical bill, the rent increased, the car registration. Life had a way of keeping dreams on the shelf. Her phone buzzed. Text from Maya's after-school program. "Please remember to send snack money tomorrow." $3. $3. For most people, pocket change. For Keisha, it meant choosing between Maya's snack and her own lunch. She chose Maya's snack. She always chose Maya. That afternoon, a customer left his business card on the table. Keisha picked it up before wiping down the booth. Harrison Tech Solutions, with a sleek logo that looked expensive. The man who'd dropped it was long gone, driving away in a black sedan she'd noticed parked outside a few times lately. She almost threw the card away, then slipped it into her pocket instead. Not sure why. At 2 p.m., her shift ended. Time to pick up Maya from the community center where she stayed until Keisha could afford real childcare. Which might be never. "Mommy, Emma got new light-up shoes today," Maya announced as they walked home. They make sounds when she walks. Keisha looked down at Maya's worn sneakers, the ones with holes she'd tried to patch with duct tape. Maybe for your birthday, sweetheart. Maya's birthday was 4 months away. By then, winter would be here, and Maya would need boots, not light-up shoes. That evening, after mac and cheese dinner and helping with homework, after Maya finally fell asleep on the pull-out couch, Keisha sat at their tiny kitchen table with a calculator and a stack of bills. Rent, $850. Electric, $127. Phone, $45. Maya's after-school program, $120. Groceries, whatever was left, which was usually around $40 for the whole month. She had 2 jobs, the diner and cleaning offices on weekends, and it still wasn't enough. It was never enough. The nursing school brochure lay open beside her. Transform your future, the headline promised. Evening classes available. Keisha traced the words with her finger. She was smart enough. She was hard-working enough. She just wasn't lucky enough to have been born into a family that could help with tuition. She whispered a prayer, the same one every night. Please just give me one break, one chance. I promise I won't waste it. Outside, a black sedan drove slowly past their building, pausing for just a moment before disappearing into the night. Keisha didn't notice. She was too busy figuring out how to make $18 last until Friday. What she couldn't have known was that someone had already noticed her. Someone who had been watching. Someone who was about to test just how far her kindness could stretch. Then came that Tuesday morning when everything started to change, though she had no idea yet. The rain hit the city like a punishment. By 6 a.m., water was rushing down the gutters, turning streets into rivers. The weather app on Keisha's cracked phone screen flashed flood warnings. Rosa had called in sick with his back acting up again, leaving Keisha alone to open the diner. She flipped the sign to "Open" and watched the empty street through rain-streaked windows. Days like this meant maybe 5 customers all morning. Days like this meant going home with $12 in tips instead of 20. She couldn't afford $12 days. The police scanner behind the counter crackled with reports of road closures and accidents. The kind of morning when smart people stayed home. The kind of morning when Keisha still had to work because staying home meant no money at all. She was refilling the coffee machine when she saw him. A small figure across the street, hunched under a jacket that was too thin for the downpour. Even through the rain, she could tell he was soaked through. A boy, maybe 12 years old, standing under the broken awning of the closed electronics shop. He wasn't waiting for the rain to stop. He was staring at the diner. Keisha watched him for 5 minutes, 10 minutes. He didn't move, just stood there in the rain, backpack clutched against his chest, looking through the window like he was trying to solve a puzzle. She'd seen hungry kids before. This was different. This boy had that look, the one she remembered from her own childhood. Pride fighting with need, wanting help, but not knowing how to ask for it. His lips were turning blue. The boy took a step toward the diner, then stopped. I took another step, stopped again, like he was fighting with himself. That's when Keisha noticed his shoes. Expensive sneakers, but worn down to nothing. Designer brand, but the soles were separating from the leather. The kind of shoes that used to be nice, but had walked too many miles. His clothes told the same story. Good quality, but old. Clean, but carefully patched. Someone was taking care of this boy, but they didn't have much to work with. She knew that story. She'd lived that story. The boy pressed his face against the window, cupping his hands around his eyes to see inside. When he spotted Keisha looking back at him, he jumped away like he'd been caught stealing. But he didn't leave. Keisha's heart cracked a little. She'd been that kid once. Standing outside the bakery after school, smelling the bread, counting the change in her pocket and knowing it wasn't enough. She walked to the door and turned the lock. "Honey, you're soaked through," she called out. "Come inside before you catch pneumonia." The boy froze. I don't have money for food, ma'am." His voice was polite. well spoken. But underneath the politeness was something that made Keisha's chest tighten. This wasn't a kid looking for a handout. This was a kid who was genuinely hungry. "Good thing I made way too many pancakes this morning," she lied smoothly. "Can't let them go to waste." "What's your name?" "Thomas." He stepped inside, dripping water onto the worn linoleum. "Are you sure? I really can't pay." "I'm Keisha." "And I'm sure." She grabbed a towel from behind the counter. "Sit anywhere you like." Thomas chose the booth farthest from the window, back to the wall. Street smart. This kid had learned to watch his surroundings. While Keisha cooked, Thomas sat perfectly still, hands folded in his lap. Waiting. Not demanding. Not complaining about the wait time or asking for extra anything. Just grateful. "You walk to school from here?" she asked, sliding a plate of pancakes and scrambled eggs across the table. "Yes, ma'am." About 2 miles. 2 miles in this weather. No wonder he was soaked. Wonder he. "Every day?" Thomas nodded, cutting his pancakes into precise, small bites, making them last. "My grandmother works nights. She's sleeping when I leave for school. No parents mentioned. Living with grandmother. Walking 2 miles to school." The picture was getting clearer, and it looked familiar. "Well," Keisha said, refilling his orange juice, "looks like we both got here early. This can be your spot. Every morning, 6:45. Deal?" Thomas looked up at her, eyes wide. For a second, she thought he might cry. Instead, he nodded. "Deal. But someday I'll pay you back. I promise." "Sweetheart, you just did. You gave me someone to cook for." What Keisha didn't see was the black sedan parked 2 blocks away, engine running, windshield wipers moving slowly back and forth. The man inside had been watching the whole interaction through a pair of high-end binoculars. He picked up his phone and made a call. "She took the bait, just like you said she would." For 3 weeks, their morning ritual continued. But Keisha had no idea she was about to save more than just breakfast. 6:45 a.m. every single day. Thomas would appear at the window like clockwork, and Keisha would have his plate ready. Pancakes on Monday, eggs and toast on Tuesday, French toast on Wednesday. She called them leftovers and mistakes. But they both knew the truth. She was spending her tip money every day. The money she needed for Maya's shoes. The money she needed for her nursing school application. The money she needed to survive. But she couldn't stop. Not when she saw how Thomas ate careful, grateful, making every bite count. Not when she saw how he did his homework at the counter during slow mornings, neat handwriting, advanced math problems that impressed her. "You're smart," she told him one morning, looking over his calculus homework. "My dad taught me," Thomas said quietly. Then he changed the subject, like he always did when family came up. Rosa was getting suspicious. "Keisha, mija, the food costs are up 20% this month. Maybe the suppliers raised prices?" she suggested weakly. Rosa wasn't stupid, but he was kind. He pretended to believe her. The routine was perfect until it wasn't. Wednesday morning, Thomas didn't show up. Keisha kept checking the window, the pancakes getting cold on the griddle. By 7:15, she was worried. By 7:30, she was scared. Thursday morning, same thing. Empty window, cold pancakes, growing fear. Friday morning, 7:30 a.m. Keisha was about to throw away another untouched breakfast when Thomas burst through the door. His eyes were red. His hands were shaking. "They're coming for me today." The words tumbled out between ragged breaths. "Social services. I don't know where they'll take me." Keisha dropped the coffee pot she was holding. It shattered on the floor, but she didn't care. "Slow down, honey." "What happened?" "My grandmother." Thomas wiped his nose with his sleeve. "She had chest pains Tuesday night. They took her to the hospital. Her heart, they say she needs surgery. The pieces clicked into place. No Thomas Wednesday or Thursday because he was at the hospital. No one to take care of him. Where have you been staying? With Mrs. Lane next door, but she can't keep me. She's got her own grandkids. Thomas's voice cracked. The social worker lady called this morning. She's coming at 10 a.m. to pick me up. Pick you up for what? Foster care, until grandmother gets better, if she gets better. Keisha felt something fierce rise up in her chest. The same feeling she got when Maya was sick, when Maya was scared, when Maya needed her mama to fix the unfixable. Come on. She grabbed her purse and her keys. We're going to fix this. But you're working. Rosa, she called to the back office. Family emergency. Can you cover my shift? Go, mija. Family first. Thomas stared at her. I'm not your family. You are now. The drive to the hospital ate up 2 hours and half a tank of gas. Hospital parking was $8. $8 Keisha didn't have, but she fed quarters into the meter anyway. The ICU was a maze of beeping machines and worried families. Thomas led her to room 314, where a tiny woman lay connected to more wires than seemed possible. Grandma, Thomas whispered. The woman's eyes fluttered open. When she saw Thomas, she tried to sit up. My boy, my sweet boy. Her voice was weak but fierce. They want to take you away. This is Keisha, Thomas said. She's the one I told you about. The one who feeds me breakfast. The grandmother's eyes found Keisha's. You're the angel. I'm just a waitress, ma'am. But I'm here to help. For the next 4 hours, Keisha became someone she didn't know she could be. She talked to nurses, demanding answers. She cornered doctors, asking questions. She called the social worker and negotiated like her life depended on it. The boy has a temporary placement lined up with a church family, she told the social worker over the phone. Mrs. Patterson from First Baptist. She's taking him tonight. It was a lie. She didn't know Mrs. Patterson from First Baptist, but she'd figure it out. She spent her last $20 on parking extensions. Her phone was buzzing with messages from Maya's school. Where was she? Maya was waiting in the aftercare program, wondering why Mommy was late. But Keisha couldn't leave. Not yet. At 6 p.m., she finally had good news. The surgery was scheduled. Thomas could stay with the church family. The social worker was satisfied. Thomas hugged his grandmother goodbye, promising to visit every day after school. In the hospital elevator, he turned to Keisha. Why did you do all that? You don't even know me. The elevator doors opened, and they walked toward the parking garage. Keisha thought about her answer. She thought about being 12 years old and having nobody. She thought about Maya and how she'd want someone to help her daughter if she was ever in trouble. Because somebody should have helped me when I was 12, she said finally. Thomas was quiet until they reached her beat-up Honda. How much did today cost you? Keisha didn't want to think about it. Gas, parking, lost wages from missing her shift, lost tips. At least $60, maybe more. Don't worry about that. But you need that money. I've seen you counting your tips. I know you're struggling. Smart kid, too smart. Sometimes the right thing costs more than you can afford, she said. You do it anyway. They drove in comfortable silence until Thomas spoke again. My dad's coming back next week. He's been away on business, but grandmother's surgery changed everything. He'll want to meet you. I'd like that, Keisha said, imagining a man who worked construction or drove trucks. Someone who'd raised such a polite, smart boy couldn't be too bad. He's going to want to pay you back. For everything. You tell your dad that seeing you safe is payment enough. What Keisha didn't see was the black sedan following them home, staying 3 cars back, professional and invisible. The driver was speaking quietly into a Bluetooth headset. Yes, sir. She did exactly what you predicted. Spent money she doesn't have, missed work. Put the boy first. A pause. Your assessment was correct. She's the real deal. Keisha thought she'd simply helped a child in need. She had no idea that the child was about to repay her in ways she never imagined. Saturday morning felt different. Keisha dragged herself to work on 3 hours of sleep, her body aching from the stress of the previous day. Maya had asked a dozen questions about why Mommy was so late picking her up, questions Keisha couldn't fully answer. "You look terrible, mija," Rosa said as she tied her apron. His eyes were concerned but not angry. "Is everything okay with your family?" "Just a friend who needed help," she said, which was true enough. Rosa nodded and didn't press. That's why she loved working for him. The diner felt empty without Thomas at 6:45. Keisha kept glancing at the window, missing their morning routine more than she expected. She'd gotten used to his quiet presence, his polite, "Thank you, Miss Keisha," his homework spread across the counter. At 10 a.m., the bell above the door chimed. Keisha looked up from the register and nearly dropped the coffee pot again. Thomas walked in, but he wasn't alone. Behind him, a tiny woman in a wheelchair, an oxygen tank attached to the side, but her eyes bright and fierce. "Grandma wanted to meet you," Thomas said, his face lighting up for the first time in days. The grandmother wheeled herself closer to the counter, her gnarled hands gripping the armrests. When she spoke, her voice was weak but determined. "You," she said, pointing a shaking finger at Keisha. "You saved my boy's future." "Ma'am, I just—" "No." The old woman's voice grew stronger. "Don't you dare minimize what you did. I know what it cost you. Thomas told me everything." Keisha glanced at Thomas, who looked embarrassed but proud. "You used your own money," the grandmother continued. "You missed work. You fought for a child who isn't even yours." Tears gathered in her eyes. "In 68 years, I've met maybe 3 people with hearts like yours." She reached into her purse and pulled out a worn envelope, the kind that had been folded and refolded 100 times. "This is for you. For everything." She opened the envelope and Keisha's breath caught. Bills. Lots of them. 1s and 5s and 10s, but more money than she'd seen in one place in months. "I counted it 3 times, the grandmother said. $300. It's everything I have saved for Thomas's school clothes and supplies, but—" "No." Keisha stepped back like the money might bite her. "No, ma'am, I can't take that." "You have to. It's not enough. It'll never be enough for what you did, but it's all I have." Keisha thought about Maya's shoes with the holes, about the nursing school application sitting unfinished on her kitchen table, about the $18 in her mason jar that was now down to maybe $6. $300 would solve everything. For a while, anyway. "Ma'am, you need that money for your recovery, for medicine and therapy and—" "I need to know that good people get rewarded for being good," the grandmother interrupted. "The world doesn't work that way enough." Thomas pulled something from his backpack. A keychain, simple but elegant, with a small logo that looked expensive. "My dad got this for me before he left for his business trip," Thomas said. "But I want you to have it. So, you remember that good things happen to good people." Keisha took the keychain, studying the logo. Harrison Tech Solutions. Where had she seen that before? "Your father works in computers?" "Something like that," Thomas said, smiling mysteriously. "He'll be back next Friday." "He really wants to meet you." The grandmother leaned forward in her wheelchair. "Child, my grandson's father is going to want to thank you properly. But right now, you take this money. You take it for your own daughter, for your own dreams." Keisha looked at the envelope again. $300. A fortune in her world. "I can't," she said firmly, pressing the envelope back into the grandmother's hands. "Thomas brightened my mornings. That's enough payment." The old woman's eyes filled with tears. Most people would take the money. Most people didn't get to know Thomas, Keisha replied. He's special. You raised him right. What none of them noticed was the man in the expensive suit sitting in the corner booth, newspapers spread in front of him like he was reading. He'd been there for 20 minutes, watching every interaction, listening to every word. He smiled and made a note in his phone. Character assessment confirmed. She's exactly what we need. As their friendship deepened, Keisha began noticing things that didn't quite add up about Thomas's family. Thomas was back to his regular routine, eating breakfast at 6:45 every morning. But now that his grandmother was recovering, he insisted on paying. Real money, not quarters and crumpled dollar bills like most kids his age. Where does a 12-year-old get $20 bills? Rosa asked one morning, watching Thomas leave a generous tip. Keisha wondered the same thing, but didn't want to pry. The boy had been through enough. Still, she started noticing things. His backpack was worn but expensive. Designer brand with a logo she recognized from billboards downtown. His phone was the newest model, the kind that cost more than Keisha made in 2 weeks. When it rang during breakfast, he'd glance at the screen and sometimes step outside to take calls. Sorry, Miss Keisha. Just work stuff. Work stuff? What kind of work is called a 7th grader? Tuesday morning, she overheard part of his conversation through the window. No, the user interface needs to be more intuitive. Kids won't engage if they can't figure it out in 30 seconds. Pause. Yes, I tested it myself. Trust me, Dad, 13 clicks is too many. Keisha stared. That wasn't how 12-year-olds usually talked. Wednesday, an elderly customer was struggling with his smartphone, trying to video call his grandson. Thomas noticed and walked over. May I help, sir? Within minutes, Thomas had the man connected to his family, had shown him 3 shortcuts, and had downloaded an app that would make future calls easier. Son, you know more about this thing than the kid at the phone store, the man said, amazed. My dad's company makes technology that helps people communicate better, Thomas replied casually. We beta test everything before it goes public. We? Beta test? That afternoon, Keisha Googled Harrison Tech Solutions on the library computer during her break. Her heart nearly stopped. The logo from Thomas's keychain filled the screen. But this wasn't some small local business. This was a major tech company. Articles about artificial intelligence. Something called Series B funding. Numbers with more zeros than she could count. The founder's photo was professional and confident, but the website only showed him from behind or in silhouette. Visionary leader transforming education through technology, the bio read. David Harrison believes technology should serve everyone, not just the privileged. David Harrison, Thomas's father. Keisha's hands shook as she scrolled through more articles. Harrison Tech raises $50 million. Revolutionary AI platform serves 2.3 million students. The startup that's changing everything. This couldn't be the same family. Could it? Thursday morning, she watched Thomas more carefully. The way he carried himself. The way he spoke to adults like an equal. The way he casually mentioned things like market research and user experience. And those black cars that seemed to be everywhere lately. Always parked where they could see the diner. Always with professional-looking drivers who never came inside. Thomas, she said carefully, what exactly does your father do? Thomas smiled that mysterious smile she was getting used to. He solves problems people didn't know they had. When Friday morning arrived, Keisha expected to meet a grateful parent. What she got was a revelation that changed everything. 6:30 a.m. Keisha was prepping the morning specials when she heard them. Car doors slamming. Not one or two, multiple doors, closing in perfect sequence like a military operation. She looked through the window and felt her breath catch. 3 black SUVs had pulled up to Rosa's diner. Professional drivers. tinted windows, the kind of vehicles that screamed money and power. "What in the world?" Rosa muttered, peering over her shoulder. Keisha's first thought was that they'd made a mistake. Wrong location. Maybe some corporate meeting was supposed to happen at the fancy hotel downtown, not at a rundown diner on the edge of nowhere. Then she saw Thomas through the window, face pressed against the glass, eyes lighting up like Christmas morning. "Dad's here!" he called out, bursting through the door. "Dad?" The lead SUV's door opened, and out stepped a man who commanded attention without trying. Tall, confident, wearing a suit that probably cost more than Keisha's rent. But his smile was warm and real and exactly like Thomas's. "Dad!" Thomas ran to him, and the man caught him in a hug that made Keisha's heart squeeze. "Hey, buddy." "Miss me?" "Every day. Dad, this is Keisha, the one I told you about." The man walked toward the diner, and Keisha tried to process what she was seeing. This wasn't the construction worker or truck driver she'd imagined. This was someone who belonged in boardrooms and magazine covers. He extended his hand to her. "David Harrison, I've heard so much about you." Harrison, Thomas's keychain, the business card, the Google search. It hit her all at once. You're Harrison from Harrison Tech Solutions." David's smile widened. "Guilty as charged, and you're the woman who's been taking care of my son." Keisha felt the room spin slightly. She gripped the counter for support. "The customer who dropped the business card." "That was you?" 3 months ago, yes. I'd been coming here for weeks, watching Thomas's routine, making sure he was safe." David's expression grew serious. "I needed to know who was in my son's life when I couldn't be there." Rosa whistled low under his breath. "Mija, you didn't tell me you were friends with millionaires." "I didn't know," Keisha whispered. Thomas bounced between them, excited. "Dad, tell her about the company. Tell her about the new program." "Slow down, Thomas." "Oh," David chuckled, but his eyes never left Keisha's face. "Miss Williams, may I ask you something? Why did you help my son?" The question caught her off guard. Because he needed help. You used your own money. Money you couldn't afford to spend. How did he know that?" Keisha's cheeks burned. "Thomas is a good kid." "Yes, he is. But that's not why you helped him." David pulled out his phone, scrolled through something, then turned the screen toward her. "This is a report from the private investigator I hired to watch Thomas. Would you like to know what it says about you?" Keisha's mouth went dry. "You had me investigated?" "I had to know who was caring for my son." The report is illuminating. David began reading. Subject consistently arrives early to work despite obvious financial stress. Pays for meals for homeless individuals using personal tips. Advocates for elderly customers who have billing disputes. Missed full day of work to help unrelated child navigate hospital bureaucracy. He looked up. "Shall I continue?" "You've been watching me for months." Keisha's voice was barely audible. "I've been protecting my investment," David said gently. "Not financial investment, human investment. Thomas chose you. Out of everyone in this neighborhood, everyone he encountered, he chose you to trust. In my experience, 12-year-olds are excellent judges of character." Thomas stepped forward. "Dad had to go to California for work, but he made sure I was safe." The cars outside, those were his people, making sure nothing bad happened to me. "You mean?" Keisha's brain was struggling to catch up. "The whole thing was a test," David confirmed. "Not of you, you were never being tested. You were being observed. Thomas was learning about independence, about making good choices, about recognizing genuine kindness versus manipulation." "I don't understand." David's expression softened. "Keisha, may I call you Keisha? My company has been successful beyond my wildest dreams. We've got more money than we know what to do with. But all the money in the world can't buy what you gave my son." "What did I give him?" "You showed him that kindness exists without expectation of reward, that good people will help others even when it costs them dearly. That character matters more than circumstances." David's voice grew emotional. "Do you know how rare that is? Especially for a kid who's grown up around people who always want something?" Thomas nodded enthusiastically. "Dad says most people are nice to me because they know who he is. But you were nice to me when you thought I was nobody." "You were never nobody," Keisha said automatically. "Exactly." David smiled. "That's exactly what I hoped you'd say." The other SUVs had emptied during their conversation. Professional-looking people in expensive clothes were filing into the diner, tablets and phones in hand, treating Rosa's like it was perfectly normal to hold a business meeting over coffee and donuts. "Dad," Thomas said, "show her the proposal." "Proposal?" Keisha echoed. David pulled a leather folder from his briefcase. "Keisha Williams, I'd like to offer you a job." "A job?" She laughed nervously. "Mr. Harrison, I'm a waitress. I don't know anything about technology." "You know about people," David replied. "And that's exactly what we need." What David offered next would not only change Keisha's life, it would transform her entire community. David opened the leather folder, revealing documents that looked more official than anything Keisha had ever seen. Letterhead, seals, numbers that made her dizzy. "Community Impact Director," he said, sliding the papers across the counter. "Starting salary, $120,000 annually, plus benefits plus equity in the company." Keisha stared at the number. She read it 3 times to make sure she wasn't hallucinating. "Mr. Harrison, I think you have me confused with someone else." "David," and no confusion at all. He leaned against the counter like they were discussing the weather, not her entire future. "Harrison Tech Solutions is expanding our education programs to 50 underserved communities across the country. We need someone who understands both the technology and the real needs of families like yours." Rosa dropped the coffee pot he was cleaning. It clattered against the sink but didn't break. "Your job," David continued, "would be implementing our AI tutoring programs in communities that need them most. You'd manage a team of 12 community liaisons across 3 states. You'd work directly with me on product development, making sure our technology actually serves the people who need it. I don't know anything about artificial intelligence. You know about Thomas. You know about Maya. You know about every family that comes through this door struggling to give their kids a better life." David's voice grew passionate. "Our programmers are brilliant, but they've never worried about choosing between groceries and school supplies. They've never had to explain to a child why they can't afford the things other kids have." Thomas nodded enthusiastically. "Dad says the best products come from people who live the problems they're trying to solve." "But You're just what?" David interrupted gently. "Just someone who navigated hospital bureaucracy to save a child from foster care? Just someone who advocated with social workers like you'd been doing it for years? Just someone who saw a system failing a kid and refused to accept it?" Keisha felt tears prick her eyes. When he put it like that. "The position comes with a fully funded master's degree in educational technology," David continued. "Classes designed around your schedule, mostly online, with direct mentorship from our senior team. We invest in our people's growth because it makes our mission stronger." He pulled out another document. "This is the community investment proposal. Harrison Tech will establish a permanent learning center right here in your neighborhood. $200,000 in initial funding. Rosa's Diner becomes our unofficial headquarters for parent engagement programs." Rosa's eyes went wide. "My diner?" "Your diner feeds the community," David said with a smile. "We want to help you do it better. New equipment, expanded space, catering contracts for all our educational events." Thomas pulled out his laptop, of course he had a laptop, and opened a presentation. The screen showed architectural plans, budget projections, and program outcomes from other cities. "This is what we've done in Seattle," Thomas explained, clicking through slides like a seasoned presenter. "Reading levels up 40%, Parent engagement up 300%. Local unemployment is down by half. Thomas helped design the student interface, David added proudly. He's been my primary beta tester since he was 8 years old. That explained so much. Advanced vocabulary, business knowledge, the confidence with adults. I don't understand, Keisha said slowly. Why me? You could hire anyone, people with degrees and experience, and because you don't see Thomas as a rich kid or a poor kid or a test score, David interrupted. You see him as Thomas. That's exactly the perspective we need. He shared his own story then. Foster care until 18, working 3 jobs to get through college, building the company because he believed technology should serve everyone, not just the privileged. I know what it's like to be hungry, he said quietly. I know what it's like to have dreams bigger than your bank account. That's why Thomas and I moved to this neighborhood 6 months ago. We wanted him to understand that not everyone has what we have. You live here? Keisha asked, stunned. 3 blocks away. The house with the blue shutters and the vegetable garden. Thomas walks to school every morning because I want him to understand his community, not just observe it from a car window. Thomas grinned. Plus, I like the walk. Give me time to think about code. David pulled out one more document. This is the real offer, Keisha. We're not just hiring you. We're committing to your community. The Learning Center will serve 500 families in its first year. We'll hire locally teachers, administrators, support staff. We estimate 60 new jobs in the first 18 months. The numbers were overwhelming. The opportunity was overwhelming. Everything was overwhelming. I need to think about this, Keisha whispered. Of course you do. David's smile was understanding. But while you're thinking, consider this. Every morning for 3 months, you chose kindness over convenience. You chose Thomas over your own financial security. You chose hope over fear. He stood up, straightening his suit jacket. That's not luck. That's character. And character can't be taught or bought or faked. Thomas closed his laptop and looked at her seriously. Miss Keisha, you saved me when I needed saving. Now let us help save your community. The diner was quiet, except for the hum of the coffee machine and the scratch of pens as David's team worked on tablets in the corner booths. One more thing, David said, reaching into his briefcase. This is for Maya. He handed her an envelope. Inside was a letter of acceptance to Riverside Academy, one of the best private schools in the city. Full scholarship, he said simply. Whether you take the job or not. Because good kids deserve good opportunities, and good mothers deserve to see their children thrive. Keisha stared at the letter, then at Thomas, then at David. Her whole world had just changed in the space of an hour. 6 months later, the transformation was beyond what anyone had imagined possible. The same woman who used to count quarters for her daughter's school milk was now standing in front of a room full of parents, teaching them how to use tablets to help their kids with homework. Remember, Keisha said, her voice confident and clear, the AI tutor adjusts to your child's learning speed. If Maria is struggling with fractions, the program will slow down and try different approaches until she gets it. Maria's mother raised her hand. What if I don't understand it either? Then you learn together, Keisha smiled. That's the point. The Riverside Community Learning Center buzzed with activity every day after school. What used to be an empty lot between the pawn shop and the laundromat was now a state-of-the-art facility serving 847 students daily. But it wasn't just the building that had changed. Mrs. Lane, Thomas's elderly neighbor, was now the center's head of cultural programming, teaching Mandarin to kids who'd never imagined speaking a second language. The homeless woman Keisha used to feed was clean, employed as a custodian, and taking night classes to become a certified teacher's aide. Rosa's diner had doubled in size and tripled in revenue. The old man who'd struggled with his smartphone was now leading a senior citizens technology class every Wednesday morning. His grandkids visited every weekend, amazed that Grandpa knew more about apps than they did. "Mija, look at this," Rosa called out, waving a newspaper. The headline read, "Local diner owner expands business, hires 15 new employees." Below that, neighborhood unemployment drops 23% following tech center opening. Keisha's own transformation was equally dramatic. Gone were the worn uniforms and tired eyes. She dressed professionally now, but still kept an apron behind her desk at the learning center. Some habits were too good to break. Maya was thriving at Riverside Academy, but she still came to the center every afternoon. She was learning to code from Thomas, who'd become something of a legend among the younger kids. "Miss Maya, can you show me how to make the robot dance?" asked 7-year-old James, whose mother worked 2 jobs and never had time to help with homework before the AI tutoring program. "Thomas taught me, so I'll teach you," Maya said patiently. "That's how it works here." Everyone teaches everyone. The local news had caught wind of the story. Channel 7's education reporter did a feature called "From Waitress to Tech Director, a Community Transformed." "What started as simple kindness," the reporter said, standing outside the learning center, "has become a model for how technology companies can genuinely impact underserved communities." But the most dramatic changes weren't in the newspapers. They were in the kids who now believed college was possible. In the parents who no longer felt helpless when their children brought home assignments they couldn't understand. The elderly residents who weren't isolated anymore because they could video call their families. They were in the local high school's test scores, up 34% across all subjects. In the community college enrollment from the neighborhood, up 156%. In the small businesses opening along the street now that foot traffic has increased. David visited every month, treating Rosa's diner like his second office. He'd sit in the same booth where he'd first watched Thomas and Keisha, reviewing progress reports and planning expansions to other communities. The Harrison model, as education journals were calling it, had attracted attention from universities, government agencies, and other tech companies. Keisha found herself invited to conferences, quoted in articles, consulted by mayors and school superintendents. "How does it feel?" a journalist asked during one interview, "to go from serving coffee to serving as a national model for community engagement?" "I'm still serving," Keisha replied, "just serving more people." The program's success had exceeded every projection. Harrison Tech's stock price had jumped 200% since the community program launched, as investors realized that authentic community engagement wasn't just good ethics, it was good business. Other tech companies were scrambling to replicate the model, but as David told his board of directors, "You can copy our programs, but you can't copy Keisha Williams. She's one of a kind." Thomas, now 13, had grown 3 inches and gained the confidence that comes with knowing you're making a difference. He spent his afternoons teaching younger kids and his evenings working on new program features with his father. "Dad," he said one evening as they walked home past the learning center, "remember when you said this was all an experiment?" "Best experiment I ever ran," David replied. "Think it'll work in other places?" David smiled, watching through the center's windows as Keisha helped an elderly man set up his first email account. "Son, kindness is universal. We just found a way to scale it." 1 year later, the morning ritual continued, but everything had changed. 6:45 a.m. Rosa's Diner. The same time, the same place, but a completely different world. Keisha pushed through the door wearing her professional blazer, but she still had an apron folded in her briefcase. Some traditions were too precious to abandon. Thomas was waiting at their booth, because Rosa had put up a small brass plaque that read, "Reserved for Family," with his homework spread across the table. But instead of 7th grade math, he was working on code for the Learning Center's newest AI feature. "Morning, Miss Keisha," he said, looking up with that same bright smile that had won her heart a year ago. "Morning, Thomas," The usual? You know it. She still served him breakfast. He still insisted on paying, though now his $20 bills came with stories about the kids he'd helped code their first programs. The tip he left went directly into Rosa's new scholarship fund for local students. Maya joined them twice a week, backpack heavy with advanced placement coursework from Riverside Academy. She'd sit next to Thomas, the two of them discussing algorithms and social justice with equal passion. "Thomas, show Miss Keisha the new interface," Maya said, sliding into the booth. "It's for the reading comprehension module," Thomas explained, turning his laptop screen toward her. "We made it so kids can choose avatars that look like them." "Representation matters, right?" "Right," Keisha agreed, remembering the little girl she used to be, looking for heroes who shared her face. The morning rush was different now, too. Construction workers still grabbed coffee and donuts, but many of them were building new community centers in other neighborhoods. Nurses still stopped by after night shifts, but some of them were taking advantage of Harrison Tech's continuing education programs. The line at 7 a.m. now included parents dropping off kids at the learning center before work, elderly residents heading to computer classes, and teenagers who'd discovered that coding could be just as creative as music or art. "Ms. Williams," called out a voice from the door. It was Jennifer, whose son had struggled with reading until the AI program helped him catch up to his grade level. "Marcus got into the gifted program at school." "That's wonderful," Keisha beamed. "Tell him I'm proud of him." These moments happen every day now. Small victories, big dreams coming true. Kids who'd been written off by the system discovering they were brilliant all along. At 8:15, David arrived for his weekly breakfast meeting, sliding into the booth across from Thomas and Keisha like he'd been doing it all his life. "How are the Chicago applications looking?" he asked, reviewing plans for the next community center on his tablet. "Promising," Keisha replied. 3 neighborhoods have submitted proposals. I think the South Side location would be perfect." "Dad," Thomas said, "remember when you first saw Miss Keisha help that homeless lady with her meal?" David smiled. "I remember thinking, that woman understands what we're trying to build." "And now?" "Now I think we're building something she taught us was possible." Keisha's story reminds us that every single day we have chances to change someone's life, and in doing so, change our own. She started with $18 and a heart full of kindness. She ended up transforming an entire community and becoming a national leader in educational technology. Not because she was lucky, but because she chose to help when it would have been easier to look away. Think about your own neighborhood, your own community. Who's the kid standing outside in the rain? Who's the person everyone else walks past? Who could use what you have to offer, even if what you have feels small? Your smallest act of kindness might be someone's biggest breakthrough. Share this story if you believe in the power of ordinary people doing extraordinary things. Tell us in the comments about a time when helping someone led to something amazing you never expected. And if you want more stories that prove kindness is the most powerful force for change, hit that subscribe button. Subscribe. Because the world needs more people like Keisha, people who believe that giving everything you have is how you get everything you need. What if the next person you help is waiting to help you change the world?
The story you heard today wasn't cleaned up. It was told exactly as it happened. At Black Voices Uncut, we believe that's the only way truth can live. If you felt something, hit like, comment, and your reaction, and subscribe. Every week, we bring you voices that refuse to be silenced.